So today we'll continue the topic we started. Last time we saw the repertoire for white with the Nimzo Indian against the Nimzo Indian, that is, with 4 Queen C2. And today we'll try to understand the remainder of the openings. We'll try to cover as much as we can, and if something is left, we'll cover it next time. But I think we should cover most of it, depending on how many people are there and how much fun we are having and how deeply we try to understand the games. So we'll try to see how it goes. And today we'll try to. Guys, you let me know if you can hear me. Hopefully you have got the notification. Today we started 10 minutes late. I think we usually start at 2. Rajkumar, basically part 1 was the Nimzo Indian. At that point we kind of considered it as just as a one-off opening, but I will type in the link for the first one. You can later on check it out. So this is when we covered the Nimzo Indian. Thanks Manali, thanks for letting me know. Good afternoon, Rajkumar. So last time we saw the Nimzo Indian, and we'll try to understand what that was. Just a moment. So after d4, d5 is something that I've already covered with the London system, and I might go into further variations. But for now, we are focusing on knight f6, which is the more dynamic way for black to play. And after c4, black has three options: e6, g6, and c5. Last time we saw e6, knight c3, and bishop b4. So this is what we saw last time. And here we recommended the move queen c2. And now we're going to look at other systems here. So first we'll start with e6. And this is what we saw. So after knight c3, here black has two options. One is bishop b4, which we saw. Hi Amey. Next is d5, which will transpose the queen's gambit, but this is not really that important. But we will cover this as well. We will come to this in this stream itself. But for first we'll cover c5, which is something which is not very often played, but it is very, very important, I think. So we need to cover this for sure. And this is what we'll look at first, guys. So I'll wait for a few, maybe half a minute, and until then you can ask me any questions, and then we'll break through with this. This is the Benoni defense, guys. So this is usually played by people who are not worried about giving you the center. They will give you the center as black, but they will have some counterplay. So let's try to analyze as black. So here the main move for white is d5 and takes, and then something like, let's say, d6. And you can already see after e4, there's a dynamic struggle. So black has this pawn majority on the queen side, 3 versus 2, and white has this pawn majority on the king side. And now we'll flip it back. So hi Harshal. So this is the basic system we'll operate on. Against the Benoni, the basic idea for white is e5. If white can manage e5 under favorable circumstances, that would mean that he would exchange these two pawns, and then the passed d pawn will be very, very strong. It will probably be at least be on d5, go to d6, d7, and it will limit black's pieces, make them very passive, and that is white's idea here. Yes, it is kind of improved Tarash in a way, but I think it's Tarash is still, let's say, it's hard to put it because the counterplay, the type of counterplay is different. In the Tarash, the counterplay is based on piece activity. Here, it's more about queenside play. It's not about necessarily piece activity. It's also the pawns. So it's more. Of course, the strategy is the same, that you kind of go for counterplay instead of trying to maintain equality. But the type of counterplay is different because here it's more about the queen side in general and not necessarily about the pieces. Hi Abhishek. Hi Amrish. Yes, we'll cover the Slav as well. Definitely we'll cover that. So now we'll try to look at 1 or 2 games in this because it's not very commonly played. You will face this, let's say, in 1 out of 10 games, but it is very important because if you don't know, I think an example of this was Stahl's favorite opening as black. So we really need to know what to do here, because if we don't, then you know what Tal's opponent used to suffer as. So you really need to know what to do here. So we'll start with the game that I played against an international master. This was in 2019, and I managed to defeat him very convincingly, and I'll show you the system that I played. So After we'll start again, so we'll start from the opening moves: d4, knight f6, and my opponent kind of chose a different move order: c5, d5, knight f6, and c4, which is basically the same as d4, knight f6, c4, and let's say c5 and d5. And even if you play e6 here, then knight c3, then again if you play c5, all of it will basically land up in this position, regardless of howsoever both sides play this. So the basic idea is that let's follow the game directly, and we reached this position. And here black plays d6 just to kind of prevent the possibility of white pushing d6, which can be a problem sometimes. As this is the repertoire for white, I am trying to tell you what to play as white against the Benoni. I wouldn't recommend playing the Benoni as black because it's not a cup of tea for everybody, because it's very dynamic, and you really need to know when to strike. And if you don't know, then you will suffer in the same way my opponent suffered here. So that's why I think I would go for white this time. We are focusing on a full-on repertoire for white. You will have all the openings you need to know as white, and then you can play your games aggressively. Hi Bhavesh. So now, once we reach this structure, some guys who have just joined us, we are looking at the Benoni today, and this is the structure you will reach in some sort of move order, but the basic structure will be this. And here black plays d6, and now you put the pawn in the center. Rahul, I have already put out a stream on the London system, and if you can check out our channel, there is a stream already. I will maybe come up with another stream later, but to understand the basic system on how white plays on the London system, you can check out that stream first, and then I will come up with something else. Hi Ashlesh. Anita, definitely. I am going to make a video on the Sicilian. I personally play the Sicilian knight off. I have played hundreds of games in that variation, so I know a lot about it. I will definitely do that. Rajkumar, we will cover the Queen's Gambit decline most probably today itself, after we cover the Benoni, so you can stay tuned, because Queen's Gambit is very important, and as white we will cover it today. Yeah, Harshal is absolutely correct. So e4, you put the pawn in the center, and the king side is where white's play will go, the king side and the center, of course. My opponent here played the move g6, and this is the classic way to play Benoni. You put the bishop on g7, and this will kind of put a lot of pressure on the queen side, and queen side is the place where black is going to focus all his pieces on, and he will ideally like to play a6 and b5 and try to play on the queen side. So h3. Now this is the strategy. Because black has less space, okay, let's try to compare. You can see white can easily put his knight, his bishop wherever he wants to. There is no hurry for white. He can use all the space available. But for black, he has very less space available. Just compare. White has two of his pawns on the 4th and the 5th rank. But if you look at it from black, he has it on the 3rd and the 4th rank. So obviously both pawns in the center for white are advanced more than black's. That's why white has more space. And that's why ideally you should not exchange pieces. That is the basic idea. In these sort of systems where your opponent has less space, you should not exchange pieces, and that's why you play h3 to prevent the move bishop g4 and for black to exchange the knight on f3, and that's why you play h3. Yes, Abhishek, ideally I would also cover the King's Indian. It depends on how many people are there, how much fun we are having, and how deeply we analyze the games. So based on that, most probably I should be able to cover the King's Indian, the Benoni, and the Queen's Gambit today itself. It might be a longer stream if there are people watching and if you want to know about it. Otherwise, I can also split it up. But for first, we'll try to look at the Benoni because it's short and sweet and we like to get it out of the way. And it's very much fun. I think this is very fun to play. Hi, Milan. Okay, so let's continue. So after h3, my opponent played bishop g7, which is, of course, the most logical move in the position. Now you develop your pieces, a6. And whenever black plays this move a6, white has to respond with a4. That is a basic strategy. You should not allow black to expand on the queen side with b5. And that is, I think, pretty self-explanatory because you should not allow black to play on the queen side where he wants to play. So now knight d7 and bishop d3. Now in this position, castle is the main move, which we will look at in the next game, which will be another short one. But here my opponent tried to deviate with knight h5. And here the most logical move is bishop g5, which develops the piece and also attacks the black queen. Yes, Harshal, black will try to control these two squares. If he manages to do that throughout the game, then he'll be having a fine game. But he might not be able to control them because white can push through with e5 in most cases. Hi, Alpheus. So now bishop g5, and my opponent played bishop f6. So this is a crucial moment. I'm giving you two options. Should white exchange on f6 or should he play bishop h6? This is your first question for the day, guys. So what do you think white should do here? Should he exchange the bishops? The bishop on g7, as I mentioned, is a strong bishop. But should you exchange the bishop or should you go bishop h6? This is your first question for the day, guys. Hi, Siddharth. Great, Anita. You can, of course, leave and study. That is, of course, okay. So anybody who's joining now, we are looking at the repertoire for white, and we might cover more than one opening today, but for the starter, we are going to cover the Benoni. Then we might go for the Queen's Gambit and the King's Indian as well for white. So this is the first question, guys. So should we exchange? So what should we play, guys? Bishop takes f6 or bishop h6? Okay, Rahul and Amey say bishop h6. Okay, Bhavesh has a good question. Bhavesh, you can exchange the light square bishop, but the light square bishop can also have some attacking probabilities if you manage to push through e5. So as I already mentioned that e5 is the plan. So if white is thinking about e5, then the bishop on d3 is not so bad, because you know eventually the bishop might be pointing in the right direction. And anyway, there is no easy way for us to exchange the light square bishop. So anyway, we should not bother about it. And we should focus on pushing e5 whenever we can in the right circumstances. And then the bishop on d3 will not be bad at all. So guys, I agree with you. Bishop h6 is the best move for two reasons. First of all, even if black's king was castled, we should not exchange this because, as we mentioned, that we should not exchange pieces when we have more space, and also because this is a good bishop because of these pawn chains right now, so we should save our good bishop, and that makes a lot of sense. And the third reason here is that black has not even castled, so that gives us another reason to kind of play bishop h6. Siddharth, I don't think he will play g5 because first of all the knight on h5 would be hanging, and for example g5, then I can anyway move this knight. I can even directly capture here, and after you capture, I can capture on h5. I think white is already winning here. So because of the hanging knight, this move is not really good, I think. Hi Shreyash. Yeah, he cannot. He will try to castle, of course, and that is exactly what he did. He played knight g7, and that knight really looks passive, but he's hoping to kind of at the right moment later on play f5 and try to somehow manage this, and maybe it will work out for him. We'll try to see. So now I castled and he castled. And now queen d2. This makes a lot of sense. You support your bishop, you cover the dark squares, and you connect your rooks. And you also support the knight. So later on you can also think about b4 after you play rook b1. So these are many plans that white can go for. And of course, rook ae1 is also a move, rook fe1 is also a move, and rook ad1 is also a move. All of these kind of supporting the move e5. Raj, when we have space, when we have the space advantage, we should not exchange pieces, because when our opponent has less space, he has less squares to put his pieces on perfectly. For example, this knight on g7, it's very bad because it cannot come here, it cannot come here, it cannot, he can go to h5, but then the rook is attacked, and really on h5 it's not doing much. And of course it doesn't want to go to e8 because anyway what is it doing on e8? So if we possibly exchange the bishop for the knight, then black's position will be better. So ideally we should not exchange pieces when we have more space, and if you have less space, then you should exchange pieces. Let's try to flip this and see how cramped black's position is. White's pawns are putting a lot of pressure on black. So he would like to immediately play b5, but we have prevented that cleverly, and that's why black has less space and we should not exchange pieces. So now after rook b8, so he is kind of trying to prepare b5 in some circumstances, a5. So now even if he plays b5, he will capture, and then we will have a weak pawn on a6, and that will give us some chances to kind of put pressure. So rook e8 makes a lot of sense. And now I played bishop f4. So the bishop kind of went to h6 to prevent the exchange and also pushed the knight to g7, and now it's coming to f4 back to attack this weak pawn on d6. And here my opponent played queen e7. So he defends the pawn. Yes, the knight is on f6. Yeah, Sahil, absolutely correct. And the bishop on knight on g7 is not really doing much. Alphys, I did not understand your question. Purpose right about. I did not understand that. You can repeat maybe. So now knight a4. So this move also makes sense because black might try to go for b5 and we are preventing that. And also guys, we are preparing b4. And if we manage to play b4, then black can never play on the queen side, and then we will have control over the side black is strong on. And once we have control over the queen side, then we can slowly shift towards the king side, and I think black will be struggling to actually make a single useful move here. And here my opponent played knight h5 to attack the bishop. So bishop e3 and now bishop g7. So he's trying to reroute his pieces and trying to get what he usually has in the Benoni. So rook f e1, and of course what can be better than placing the rook opposite the file. And now he played queen f8, so trying to get rid of this queen. So what do you play here, guys? It's your move. So what do you think white should play here? Because it's very difficult to understand, because black might try to play knight e5 next. So that is his idea. Yeah, Alpheus, queen d2 has many purposes because it can connect the rooks, and it has many. You're absolutely correct. So guys, what do you think white should play here? Because black is kind of threatening knight e5 to exchange a pair of knights. For example, I play a random move, rook b1, knight e5, knight takes, bishop takes, and as you can see, the bishop is now free to go to d7, and black's position feels a bit better, right? Because he has exchanged a pair of pieces. Now all his pieces seem to have good squares. The bishop on e5 looks good, the bishop on c8 and d7 will look good, and now the knight on h5 also doesn't look bad. So I think that's why we have to prevent it. So how can we prevent that exchange, guys? Or at least make it more difficult? So what do you think, guys? White should play here. Okay, I have not played rook b1 here. Okay, Harshal says knight b6. Harshal, but this move doesn't serve any purpose, and it also violates the principle that I just mentioned, that you should not exchange pieces. And while it will control the queen side, but it can also be weak. I can imagine moves like rook e7 and queen d8, and then the pawn will be weak. And even if the pawn is not weak, we are exchanging pieces, which we should avoid at all cost. If possible, we should avoid exchanges. Rajkumar, again, it does solve one purpose, as mentioned by Siddharth and everybody, and even Alpheus. So this position will control black's play, and you can see the rook is passive, these two moves. Next, you can play b4 at the right moment. But the problem is it exchanges a pair of pieces. That is the only problem I have with this move. So maybe we can go to something else, some other idea, guys, some other idea. Because the purpose of playing here is to prevent this exchange. We don't want to facilitate this exchange by playing knight b6 ourselves. So we want to prevent the pair of piece exchanges. Guys, if you are here for the first time, do subscribe to our channel. We have plenty of interesting videos, and you can also like the stream so that more people can join us. Okay, knight h2. Now knight h2 is interesting. I think that is not so bad, but maybe it's bringing a piece a bit passive. That is the only issue I have here. Thanks, Shreya. I'm glad you liked the video. So guys, I'm going to mention the move. This might feel a bit, let's say, anti-positional, but still, the best move here is g4. So that makes a lot of sense. Jaykant, he mentioned the Nihal versus Carlsen, not Nihal Carlsen game. That's what Shreya mentioned. Of course, not queen c3 Siddharth, because the queen is hanging. It's right in front of the bishop, so that will lose the queen for us. We don't want to blunder the queen for sure. So definitely not that. Alphys, we are asking the move for white, not for black. So we're asking to move for white here. And I think the best move here is g4, guys, because after knight f6, first of all, he will not manage to play f5 ever. And now we play bishop f4 and we prevent knight e5. So remember this, guys. If now he plays, we capture, pawn captures, and let's say bishop g3 or bishop e3, we are attacking this pawn. In this structure is not good for black because there is a pawn on e5. This is not good for black at all because we have a protected passed pawn. So black, the e5 exchange is only good for black if he manages to put a piece on e5 at the end. Ashish Panali will stream. She will stream at night and she will stream her own topic. So I usually stream in the afternoon and then Panali streams at night. So she will have her own stream later on. Yes, Alphys, it's weakening, but somehow because white has more space and because black's pieces have no kind of way to get into white's position, it's perfectly fine for white to take this risk. And we will try to look at how actually I managed to use these pawns for a space advantage, a convincing space advantage. So now after bishop f4, my opponent, as we discussed, knight e5 is a bad move, guys, because we get a protected pass pawn. This is very, very bad for black. So he played h5 and that would make a lot of sense. But we played g5, making this knight bad again. And now knight h7 and now we play king g2. We could have of course played h4. That will also transpose, I think. So it's not really a huge difference. So now we play king g2. So we're trying to siphon up these squares, the h3, f3 square, and next we'll play h4 at some point. So now queen e7, bishop g3, knight hf8. So you can see how passive these knights are. Knight h2, in which position do you mean, Rahul? Because if in this position you mean knight h2, I think it's an okay move, but I think you should not move your pieces passive. Even if, because the main point of avoiding the exchange is to keep your opponent's pieces passive. So if you manage to make your own pieces passive, then it doesn't make much sense, right? You're kind of doing the same thing to your own pieces. And the knight on h2 is not really going anywhere. It's not going anywhere because the g4 is not a great square for the knight because f5 can come at any point, or black can even just play here, and where is the knight going? So I think maybe knight h2 is not a great move. It can be played, but maybe not in this position. So after g4 and these sort of moves, yeah, so good question. Yeah, black is cramped, Alpheus, absolutely correct. Yeah, yes, it is a classical game that I played in 2019. It was against an international master who was rated around 2380, almost 2400, and I managed to defeat that convincingly, him. And also, he also did some antics later on in the game, which I will mention once we reach the moment, because he was very nervous. I will get to that. So bishop g3, Rajkumar, because I also want to push f4 at some point. So slowly but surely, I want to push f4, and that's why I get the bishop out of the way so that I have the option of f4 at some point. So that is the idea. So now here you can see how cramped black's pieces are. Knight hf8 feels very horrible because still the knight is not really going anywhere. So now I played the move b4. Now this is an exchange sacrifice, guys, and I was not really afraid of black capturing here. But if you want to play it more solid, I think even h4 is fine. I think white is much better here. Even if you switch on the engine, it will show you that the advantage is over 1. It's like +1 plus 1.3, and it is much better for white. But I was enjoying this game, so I wanted to make it more fun. So I played b4 because I thought that if he captures with the dark square weaknesses, I think this might be even a quicker win for white, even if objectively this is not the best move. Yeah, that is also possible. I think you can play b4. But I think because black doesn't have any great moves to improve his position, it makes sense to improve your position as much as you can. So for example, once you play bishop here, if black goes knight e5, I can capture, he captures, and I can go f4. So I do not have that option if the bishop is on f4. So that is the main reason that I played bishop g3, to have the option of f4 there. So now knight e5 makes less sense for black because I will gain a tempo with f4 and the bishop has to go back. And you can imagine this is not looking good. I can even first play h4 here, and then I can kind of, let's say, push on with e5, f5. This looks very, very bad. Or even b4, of course, as usual. Yeah, the black bishop is the only good piece for black here, and that's why I do not mind exchanging it and let's say sacrificing it for a rook. So now my opponent also realized it, and he simply captured c takes b4, and I played rook a b1 to kind of capture with the rook or even with the queen. Both ways it's fine, but now I wanted to avoid the exchange. So knight e5, knight takes, bishop takes, and exactly here my opponent was in trouble because I have the option of f4, and this was the idea behind playing bishop g3, and you can see how the king on g2 protects the pawn on h3 very well. So now my opponent played bishop g7 and I played queen takes b4, and now white is much better here. So now knight d7. So finally that knight has a decent square on d7, and here I played h4, and after knight c5 I simply captured and played queen c4, and you can see this pawn chain, guys. I mean, this is just amazing for white, and this is what happens when the Benoni goes wrong for black, because he played this sideline which was slightly risky, and I managed to play the best moves with g4, bishop g3, b4, and I managed to put a lot of pressure, and his pieces are passive. He could not come up with a clear plan, and now you can look at how white is completely winning here. He tried with bishop d7, but e5, this is just horrible. Bishop b5, queen e4. Actually, even rook takes b5 is possible here. This is also completely winning. But queen e5, takes, queen c7, and now even e6 is winning because the g6 pawn is hanging. But I played rook b6 to be very solid. And look at this position, guys. I mean, to have this position as white, I think you will win all your games. So c4, queen d4, rook e c8. So he's trying to push this pawn, but because his pieces are passive and his bishop is basically garbage, he's not going to push this pawn too forward. So d6, queen d7, and rook c1, queen g4. And now he, of course, you cannot do this because of queen checks and then queen takes c4. So now rook b2, just kind of preventing any checks, and c3, rook c2, queen e6, rook takes, queen a2, bishop f2, takes, queen takes. Now the material is equal, but somehow you can look at these pawns and you can look at this bishop, and that tells you the story, guys. Yes, Siddharth, bishop g3 is not a brilliancy, but somehow, yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to prevent 95 again to exchange pieces. Yes, g6 is weak. Yeah, rook g6, I'm not sure, but maybe because you don't want to play any unnecessary sacrifice. Of course, if you are absolutely sure, you can play them, but I think this is just completely winning with the bishop on g7 being absolutely useless. So now d7, and the pawn is already almost queening. So rook d8, rook c8. You can see how passive black's position is. And somewhere around here, something fascinating happened. So we were playing and we both only had increment left. So basically it was a time control of 90 minutes each plus 30 seconds increment on each move. And by now we both had less than 1 minute. So you can imagine both of us were very stressed and we were trying to play our best moves in the position. And what happened was I played a move and I was about to press my clock, but my opponent quickly played his move and did not allow me to press the clock itself, and that is against the rules of chess. And he was an international master. I just could not believe it. And he was acting as if, I mean, he won't allow me to press he's like, I already moved, so you cannot press the clock. I immediately called the arbiter, and I told arbiter is basically like an umpire who basically knows all the rules of the game, and that's why he kind of he's the regulatory person in a tournament, and you can appeal to him during a game of chess. If you want to appeal any problem that your opponent is causing you, you can stop the clock and you can call the arbiter at any time. If your claim is wrong, your opponent will gain 2 minutes. If your claim is right, then you will basically win your claim. And then, so I called the arbiter. I told him that, my opponent is kind of not allowing to press the clock, and he's like, but I already moved. But of course, this does not make any sense. I am allowed to press the clock. He cannot prevent me from pressing the clock, because once I press the clock, I gain 30 seconds. So though that time is very useful for me when you are under 1 minute. So that is the kind of tricks even international masters play. And I was very disappointed in my opponent because he was an international master, and I don't think you should do such things. You should try to play and win fair and square and not try to do some such things. Yes, Shreya, that is a very good question, because usually you should not put your pawns like this, because after all, your bishop is bad. But somehow, because your opponent's bishop is absolutely useless here, and combined with the fact that you have a passed pawn, in this case it makes a lot of sense. And of course, because all this bishop is not really going anywhere, it's worse than the bishop on f2, because the bishop on f2 is an excellent defensive piece, while the bishop on g7, well, let's just call it a let's say a cute pawn. It's not really a bishop, it's not really doing much. Yes, Sahul is absolutely correct, because the pawns are blocking it, so in that case it is absolutely fine. So now in this position my opponent played bishop f8. He's trying, but I don't know where that bishop is going. I just captured queen d5, bishop e7, and now f5 was winning on the spot, followed by g6. And of course, but I was low on time, so I just captured the pawn. This makes a lot of sense. So queen a5, queen e4, preventing any stray checks, king f8, and e6. So you can imagine this is going very badly for black, and queen c7. So now the ending of the game is very fun, and this will show you what kind of my opponent was a bit rude. He was a bit he was not a fair player, even though he was an IM, and this will show you why that is the case. So I played queen a8 check, bishop d8, and now bishop c5. So this was the clever tactic. Yeah, because I mean, he doesn't have anything. He cannot do anything in this position. He cannot do anything in this position. So he cannot really do anything. So he's just waiting. And I played bishop c5 here, guys. So if he captures, I capture. King moves here, queen f6, and then I queen. So this way I win the game. So he cannot capture. He played king g7, and now e7. Imagine this position, guys. This is just absolutely amazing. Two passed pawns on d7 and e7, and there is absolutely nothing that black can do. So this is just stunning. This was just amazing to play over the board. And my opponent captured the pawn, and I queened. And even here, being one queen and one bishop down, my opponent kept playing, and this shows you that he was not really a fair player, and I'll show you why I say so. So after, oh, rook exchange ke badle, okay, let me see. Okay, queen b6 you mean. But this doesn't work, I think, because he can capture and he can play here. Now you can play bishop c5, and I think this would still win. But I think white should not give black the chance to push these pawns at all. And queen b6, I think there might be other moves as well. But I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. This might be winning, because it is clear, it is a clear double attack. So he has to, but I think, this is the problem, guys. Yes. Queen d5 is the problem. Yeah, queen d5 is the problem, and once you move your king, he will just, I think, capture this way, and this doesn't seem clear at all. This is not clear, so I would not play this. So that's why I think what I played is fine. And after here, queens, he played queen g4, king f2, queen f4, queen f3, and here my opponent played queen d2 check. Now you can imagine in this position, being two queens and a bishop down with literally mate hanging over his head, he decided to trick me with queen d2 as if I won't see that the queen is hanging and I won't capture it. Actually, even if I play this and he captures, even then he's losing. That is how bad his position is. But I mean, to kind of play queen d2 as an IM was a bit sad to look at, and I just captured the queen and then he resigned. So I mean, this was just sad, I think. So but I managed to win this game, guys, and this was a convincing victory. And you can see, I mean, just look at this position. I think this position is just characteristic of how white can win convincing games if you play the system as white and if you manage to control your opponent's counterplay. So now we'll shortly look at another game, because that way it will be a complete round off of Benoni. It will be a very short game, and then we can move on to other openings. I think that is also very important to look at. So just a moment, guys. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this game. Yeah, it wasn't a blunder, Jaykant. He basically was hoping that I would not see that his queen is hanging because of the time pressure. It was not a blunder. He basically just was hoping against hope that I would not see that the queens were hanging. That is the only thing. So let's look at another game. D4. We'll try to hurry through this game, guys. This is another move order, but we will basically reach the same system. And here black has not played knight h5. He basically castled immediately. And here the main move for black is b5, guys. And this is the main move, and you might feel this is a pawn sacrifice, but it's not really a pawn sacrifice, because white's king in the center, black will capture the pawn on e4. Yeah, Alpheus, definitely he was an IM, but felt more like a BM, definitely. Yeah, Jaykant, after this game, we'll go to the King's Indian next. So this will just be a short game. We'll take 5 minutes at best. So I think the best move here is just to capture the pawn with the knight, not with the bishop, and rook e8, and now you just castle. This is the way you should play. You should not worry about this pawn. You should focus on the development advantage you have, guys, because all your pieces are developed, and black's queen side is not really developed. So now black captures, rook e1, a6, and here I played the move rook takes e4, rook takes e4, and knight takes d6. So I basically sacrificed the exchange temporarily. Yeah, दीवार है, ऐसी लग रहा है, दीवार की तरह लग रहे थे हमें. Absolutely correct. Yeah. Jaykan, BM means blunder master, which is there's only one BM in the world right now, that is Samay Raina. But yeah, I mean, technically there can be many. Everybody is a BM, I think, at some point. And after rook b4, a3. Now I think black should not play rook b6 because of knight c4, and then later on white will play bishop f4, d6, bishop e4, and this will be a lot of compensation. My opponent also realized that, and he sacrificed the exchange back, and now queen e2. And this looks very equal, but the basic advantage is that black's pieces are still undeveloped and white's pieces are slightly more developed than black's. And even though white has a weak pawn on d5, I think white has great chances here. So after knight d7, queen e8, queen f8, takes. Now here was my chance. I should have played the move bishop b5, and that would have given me a clear advantage. And after something like knight f6, bishop c6, and if let's say knight b8, then rook a5, and you can see how this is turning out to be better for white, because white has a lot of pressure on the pawn on a6 and the knight cannot move. And now he will play bishop d2 and try to capture the pawn on b4 as well. So this way I would have managed to gain some advantage, but the game kind of ended in a draw, in something like this, and the game later ended in a draw. But even then my opponent was higher rated, so I managed to put a lot of pressure on him. You can imagine my pawn is on d7, but the game ended in a draw. But I think still this was a great opening for white, because you can imagine here if I had played bishop b5, then automatically I would have some amazing winning chances and I would have managed to put a lot of pressure on black. So guys, this is the Benoni defense. Now I'm going to move to the King's Indian, and everybody who loves the King's Indian, then I'm going to show you something to play as white against the King's Indian, and hopefully you will like it. Thank you, Anita. I'm glad you like it. Anita, we have not really been streaming for so long, so that's why we have less subscribers than other people who are streaming. That is the only thing. So if you think you like the content, do share it with your friends if you know anybody who plays chess, and that way we can build up our audience and people can learn from us. That is the only thing. So now I'll go to the King's Indian, guys, and that is a very important opening. I think all of you would know by now. So let's go there, guys. Just a moment. BM का टाइटल के लिए कोई अप्लाई नहीं करना पड़ता जयकांत, वो सेल्फ मिल जाता है. So anytime you want, you can get the BM title by yourself. So that is the thing. Thanks, Anita. I'm glad you like it. Okay, so now we move to the King's Indian, guys. And this is very, very interesting because this is a very dynamic way for black to play. And usually you need to know what to do. And there is a lot of theory here, so we cannot of course cover all theory, that would be impossible, but we'll try to understand the strategy and the principles that we kind of are important in the King's Indian, and we'll try to move it from there. Alpha is that great if you have defeated Samay. So guys, now we'll move to the King's Indian, and we'll try to understand a game that I played against another international master. This one was from Latvia. I played this in 2016 and I managed to win this game. And even though it's let's say it's not let's say the absolute main line, but it does tell you the basic principles and the strategies which are very very important for the King's Indian. Ah yes, just a moment, I will adjust it, guys. Yeah, now it should be fine. Yeah. uh, Yeah, Harshal, both can play, but for white, it's not so threatening because usually white has other systems to play, and that's why white usually does not go for the King's Indian, because usually King's Indian is very dubious because you allow your opponent to take the center, and usually if you're white, so white prefers to take the center himself. So that's why there are more people playing the King's Indian as black rather than as white. That's great, Alphys, if you studied this opening. So you can also kind of help us around, and you can also try to guess the moves. So now, guys, we look at this game, and this is the basic structure we will usually see. And white has 3 pawns in the center, so he definitely has the center, and this is the main line, guys. There are many variations with f4, bishop g5, h4, just bishop e2, bishop e3. There are so many variations here that it would be almost impossible, but I think we should go for the main line with knight f3, castles, and bishop e2. This is the basic thing. Rajkumar, I would say if you have an online rating of let's say 1300 1300 plus, then I think you can play an offline tournament. That should be enough for you to actually get an over the board rating for sure. If you want to be absolutely sure, you can have a rating of 1100 1200 and still get a FIDE rating, but then it's not so sure. It depends on how you play. But if you have an online rating of 1300 plus, you will definitely get a FIDE rating if you play over the board tournaments. But of course, during COVID, I would not recommend that. So maybe you can kind of do it later. Yeah, Harshal, there are some similarities between the Sicilian Dragon variation and the King's Indian. But Sicilian Dragon, I think their white can sometimes castle on the queen's side. I think Sicilian Dragon, I think, because first of all, um, in the dragon, black is not really giving up the queen side. He's not completely giving up the queen side. He's trying to play on both sides of the board. Here, it's just the king side for black. Usually, he is not really focused about the queen side. Yeah, Rajkumar, if you have 1700 leeches, definitely you will get your over the board rating if you play the tournament. So I think you can definitely play as soon as the tournaments get up. Harshal, we are looking from white side, so there should be no need to flip the board. This is for white against the King's Indian. So that's why we should look at it from white side. Hi Pratik. Hi Pratik, we already looked at, or anybody else who has just joined, we already looked at the Benoni defense for white, and now we look at the King's Indian. Guys, do like the stream so more people can join us. So now e5. So this is the main move for black, guys. So basically black will capture. You cannot really capture here, guys, because black will always have something like, let's say, knight e4, and this will just be dead equal. So you should not really capture this pawn, and you should just castle. You should just castle here, and knight c6 is black's main move. This is the main move that black plays, and you play d5, and this is black's strategy, that black plays knight e7. So he has closed the center, or forced you to close the center, and now he will say that I have proper control of the king side and I will try to play on the king side. However, there are many variations where he can also play on the queen side a little bit, and my opponent in this game did that. In the next game, we look at if let's say black goes completely on the king side, but for now we look at if black tries to maintain both, and there are many strategies for black here we'll try to look at. Hi Abhishek. Guys, if you're here for the first time, do subscribe to the channel and you will get notified of all our streams. Yes, Alpheus, absolutely correct. Space is more important here, and white has a lot of space here. And now you play the move knight d2. So this is something that I've played, and I recommend this wholeheartedly because many times black immediately wants to play knight h5. What he wants is, let's try to play rook e1, knight h5, let's play rook b1 and f5. This is black strategy. So what we are forcing here is by playing knight d2, first of all, we are preventing knight h5, not this way of course, this way. We are preventing knight h5, and that is the main idea. And of course, you're also moving the knight towards the queen side, where it will go to c4 or it will go to b3, and it depends on how black plays. Here you can also play b4, or you can also play knight e1, as Alpheus mentioned. So these are two other ways to play, but even then the strategy, the basic strategy is the same. You're trying to push your pawns on the queen side, and black will try to push his pawns on the king side. The strategy is the same, guys. Yeah, Alpheus, knight e1, knight d3 is also a great strategy, but the basic principle is still the same. You're trying to push through b4 and c5. I don't think you should play on the king side, guys, because g3 would be bad, Sahil, because you are weaker on the king side, and you should not play on the side of the board where you're weaker. So you should not push these pawns. You should keep them solid unless it's absolutely necessary. You should not push these pawns. There are some circumstances where you can, but it's rare. Sahil, yeah, in this variation, usually I think it is definitely possible. Yeah, guys, I think my screen just froze. It happens sometimes. I don't know. Maybe it also loves the King's Indian, and that's why. Anyways, so now there are many variations, but I would recommend knight d2. And after c6, which is another way for black to play, so he kind of is playing on both sides of the board. I just played b4. And after a5, I just captured. Because what white wants is to push, he wants to push a4 and c5 and knight c4. So that's why black immediately plays a5 to prevent that. Yeah, I mean, most attacking players like Gary Kasparov, Hikaru Nakamura, and Bobby Fischer preferred this. But during Bobby's time, the theory was not so developed. So, and even during Kasparov's time, so I think in modern times, only Nakamura has played this a lot. I think once theory is known, I think white is usually better here. So that's why. Pratik, it wasn't related to the let's say the 500 subs. Pre-move party anyway is a good idea. I mean, this it's not based on the subs, I think. Sahil, I am not nervous. I don't know why you say that. Rishul, back rank is not really important because back rank is important in the end game, and this is not the end game, this is the middle game. So usually playing g3 would only weaken your square somehow. So let's try to play g3. Now, ignore these two pawns, guys, for now. If you play g3, then you're already weakening your king. You can see how the light squares are weak. The bishop can come to h3, and black can play f5, f4, and all of these situations. So I think you should not create weaknesses on the king side, and these three pawns should remain like this unless forced. And once black goes f5, you just play f3 to support your pawn, and you just keep it like this. There are many ways for black to play after knight d2. Actually, the most common way is to just play knight d7 and f5, and we will look at this in the next game. But in this game, my opponent played c6, guys. So this is the second way to play. And after b4, a5, I just took. After queen takes, queen c2. So I'm just trying to support my pieces, supporting the knight, supporting the pawn. And after bishop d7, knight b3. So as I discussed, this knight will go to b3, all this knight will go to c4, depending on the situation how black plays. And because this knight is perfectly placed on b3, attacking the queen, so this makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Pratik, it's not very bad, but yeah, it doesn't suit the positional principles here. I think you should not play on the king side. Yeah, Sahila, yeah. Yeah, Shreya, I have defeated grandmasters, many grandmasters, but my highest win has only been 2500. I have not really defeated any 2550 player or 2600 player. My highest win has been against 2500. Yeah, middle game is very, very important. Actually, absolutely correct. So queen c7, bishop d2, c takes, and now c takes, b5, a3. So I'm just trying to prevent this pawn move. Rook f c8, queen b1, queen b8. And what do you think is a good move in this position, guys? This is an interesting moment. And I did play a good move here, but I'm going to give you this question. So what do you think white should play? Because you have to understand that the only weakness black right now has is b5, and he wants to push b4 to exchange it. If black manages this, then the position would be equal, even though white will have more space, but he will also have more weaknesses. So the position will be roughly equal. Maybe white will be slightly better. But what do you think white can play here, guys? Pratik, that is not really bad. You can always move forward. So what do you think, guys? White should play here. Okay, I really like Alpheus, your idea. Knight a2 makes a lot of sense. The only problem is that a pawn on a3 is hanging. So if the pawn on a3 was not hanging, I would definitely play this move. So can you do something else here? The idea is correct, but the execution is wrong. So maybe you can do something else, because the knight on c3, if moved to a2, kind of hangs the a3 pawn. So maybe something else here, Alpheus. Pratik, you have absolutely hit the nail on the head. I think your highest win is going to be much higher than, let's say, 1200. So Alpheus knight c1 also works, but I think the issue here is that the knight on c3 is a bit loose. Doesn't it feel so, guys? Because it's like it's being attacked by the rook, and it's a bit loose. It can be hanging sometimes. So if you can prevent this move b4 by moving this knight on c3 instead of the knight on b3, then I think it will be better for white. And that is why, great Rajkumar, you can, of course, yeah, definitely, you can check out the video later. So that is why moving this knight is better. That is the basic idea. So what Sahil says, queen b2. Again, Sahil, b4 is the problem. And after captures, black has got rid of his weakness. And now there is a pin here. So I would not recommend queen b2. Harshal, a4 is wrong. Definitely wrong, because we do not want to exchange these two pawns. We want to prevent the exchange of these two pawns, because this is the weakness. This is the clear weakness on b5, and we want to attack it, not exchange it. Alpheus and Pratik, absolutely correct. Bishop b5 is not really possible, Rishul, because he can just capture, and because the queen is there, white would just lose a piece. So it is not really possible. Of course, if it was possible, we would capture the pawn. So Alpheus is absolutely correct, and so is Pratik, who was the first to say this. Knight to d1 is the best move, and that is the move that I played in the position, because you also prepare moves like bishop b4, and you can also move your knight to a better square. And after this, my opponent played knight e8, f3, rook c7, knight f2, and the knight is heading to this cute square, defending the king side, and also sometimes going to the queen side. So knight b6, rook c1, and you can see how very great white's pieces are here. Rishul, yeah, b5 was not really possible. Bishop b5 is not possible, because you would have lost a piece, because black had defended it twice and white had attacked it twice. So if you capture, black would win a piece. So rook c1, knight b6, and what do you think white should play here, guys? This is another moment where you can use your pieces to the maximum. So what do you think white can play here, guys? This is also a crucial moment. Now we have stabilized the position. So black cannot really push forward with b4. He cannot exchange the weak pawn on b5. He cannot push this anytime soon because we are controlling it well. So what do you think white can do here? Now we can go on the offensive, guys. So what do you think white can do here? Bishop a7 is not really possible, Alpheus. It will lose a piece. No, Rishul, there's no problem at all. It's absolutely okay. You should, whenever you have a option, you should say it out. So that way you will remember it. Whenever, let's say, you have a question in mind, if you keep it to your mind, you will always be doubtful, and also you will not remember what you learned. If you ask a question and then you get the answer, you will remember it longer, and that way it will develop your intuition. If you keep it to yourself, then you will always have a doubt. Okay, Pratik, bishop b4 is, I think, okay, but I think Alpheus has mentioned the best move here, that is knight a5, because not only does it prepare knight c6, it also prevents knight c4, and knight on a5 is a very dominating piece in black's camp, and that is why it is the best move. Bhavesh, you are absolutely correct. Knight a5 here is the best move. And after this, my opponent played knight a4. I move forward with knight c6. So if he captures, you can imagine a passed pawn landing on c6 cannot be really great for my opponent. So he played queen b6, but now I just captured the free pawn and I am just a pawn up with a dominating position on the queen side. So this is what can go wrong in the King's Indian. If you do not manage to attack on the king side, then you will definitely land in such a position where white will be controlling, dominating the queen side, and then it will be very difficult for you to play. Yeah, Alphys, I know you were joking. Yeah, definitely. Bishop a5. Bishop a5 here is possible, Harshal, but maybe he can just capture here and then he can move the knight. So knight is not really pinned here. So there is no clear plan to bishop a5. I would rather play knight a5 to kind of go the knight to c6, and that way I am really having a plan here. And remember, the knight can also go here sometimes. So this way knight a5 is better. Shobit, knight c6, you can capture with the rook. That is definitely possible. If let's say this way. But as we mentioned, because black has less space, I think we should not exchange pieces. That is the only reason. Otherwise, this is possible, but I think this would be better because you're not really exchanging a pair of rooks. Just compare these two rooks. This rook is attacking, supporting his pawn, acting his influence all the way till the 6th rank, and this rook is basically acting like a pawn, just having influence over 2 ranks. So that's why I think not exchanging rooks is better. Yeah, bishop b4 is definitely possible. It is possible, Pratik. That is also a decent move. I would not say otherwise. Bishop b4 is possible, but maybe this move order is better because you kind of prevent knight c4 from black. So that is an additional benefit here. So now here after knight c6, I win a pawn. He played knight c5, rook cb1. He was threatening knight b3. So rook b7, rook b4, knight c7. And here I played knight e7, king f8, bishop takes, rook takes. And here I played bishop b4. Actually, knight g6 was even better, just to capture extra pawn. I do not know why I did not capture this, but even this is fine. And now bishop c6. So now my opponent played rook a7, which is a very bad move because now the rook is stranded. It cannot really go anywhere. And I played king f1 and the pieces kept moving. And knight g4, h4, and now rook h1. So I have kind of brought the rook here. And because the pawn is well protected by the bishop and the rook is passive, white is completely winning in this position. Yeah, Shobit, even I do that. Even I have that problem. I often exchange pieces and sometimes I can draw winning positions. And we need to work on it. But in that specific case, I think capturing with the pawn is better. So now bishop g5, rook takes h7. And here my opponent played the move f5. And this was a mistake, a clear mistake. And here I played the move rook d7, king c5, knight takes e5, f takes e4, f takes e4, c3, king d3. And my opponent resigned because this is completely lost. Next I will capture this 3rd pawn. And the 4th pawn is also hanging. So pretty soon I'm going to be 3 or 4 pawns up. And this rook is not really doing anything in this position. And that's why my opponent resigned. So this, yeah, Alpheus h4 was a good move, and I love playing that. Yeah, Rook b8 was much better, Pratik. Absolutely correct. Rook b8 would have given him some chances, but he was worried about the a pawn just rushing through, and that's why he got worried and he lost. And this was a win against an international master who was rated 2430, so he was very strong, and that's why this was a great win, guys. And now we'll go to the next game. Yeah, opposite bishops. Yeah. But I think because in this case the pieces are so passive for black, and I'm just completely 3-4 pawns up maybe. So in this case, opposite color bishops do not play such a huge factor here. Even if he had played rook b8, yes, he would have better chances. But I think white was much better in that case as well. So I'm going to go to the next game, guys. Just a moment. His name is Smets, Dmitry Smets, Smets, Dmitry. He's from Latvia, guys. He was rated 2430 then in 2016. Just a moment, guys. So the next game, IM is more rated, Alpheus. IM is 2400 and NM is 2200. So definitely he was higher rated than me. At least 200 points higher rated than me. So if I manage to win, then definitely the opening cannot be a bad weapon for you to try against stronger players. So the next game is against another international master, and in this case my opponent was rated 2280, so he was a weak international master, but still he was an international master. So, and I managed to win this game very convincingly, and we'll try to understand this game now. Yeah, poor rook on a7, Sahil. Thanks, Sahil. Yeah, I don't know if he was a magician. If he was a magician, he would have managed to win the game, I think. So probably not a magician, guys. So now the next game, we'll try to start with the basic moves, as these moves are very similar. Knight bd7. So my opponent played knight bd7, castle, and then e5. It is the same as playing e5, castles, and knight bd7. So we saw knight c6 here. That is the main line. After castles, knight c6, d5, and knight e7. But the opponent can also play knight bd7 and e5. This is another possibility. No, definitely, Pratik, you found knight d1, so that was a great move. So I don't think you are a BM for sure. Thanks, Alpheus. Thank you. I would not be the 67 GM for sure, because there are people much closer, but I can still hope to be maybe the 70 something GM, maybe, hopefully. Yes, it is definitely possible to have tactics in the end game. Definitely it is possible. So now rook e8, guys. So once, see, you have to understand that black eventually wants to play f5, and for that the rook on f8 is perfectly placed to put pressure on the king side. If he plays rook e8, he's already kind of going in the wrong direction, and that's why it makes sense to play d5 and close the center, because if he decides to play on the king side, he will have to go back, and then he has wasted two moves with rook e8 and rook f8, and we have two extra moves here. Now my opponent played knight h5. In this case, g3 is a good move. The reason is that black is not set up to attack on the king side. He has played rook e8. That is the first issue. Second is he has played knight d7 and not knight c6 and knight e7. So the knight on d7 is more passive than the knight on e7, because it's still on the queen side. And that's why black is not set up to attack white on the king side. And specifically in this case, you can play g3. And this is not so strong for black, and this is great for white. So now knight df6, knight e1, the move many of you like, bishop h3, and now knight g2. So this looks very cute, but it makes a lot of sense because black is not prepared to push f5. Until black is prepared to push f5, he's not doing well in the King's Indian. He should be pushing f5. That is the only way he can win the game. Sahil, in this case, it's not bad because black is not set up. There are many differences. First difference, the rook is on e8. Second difference, the knight is on d7 instead of e7. And third difference, he will have to go rook f8 again. So that is 3 moves. That is simply waste. And also, when the knight is on e7, it can go to g6 and this knight will go to f6. So these two knights will cooperate very well. But because the knight is on d7, these two knights are competing for the same square, and that is really a problem for black. Yeah, Pratik, bishop fianchetto, kind of. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. So he played knight df6, bishop, knight fianchetto, I mean. And now my opponent played knight g4, and he's trying to push through with f5. I played f3, forcing him to go back, knight h6, and now I played knight d1. Now this is a great move because this is an attacking piece. I want to play knight f2 and get rid of this piece. So this is the idea, guys. So now f5, finally black plays f5, and once black plays f5, the spidey sense in your mind should start be sharp, because once black plays f5, anything can happen. You have to take care. You have to make sure you're not blundering anything. There can be sacrifices. You have to make sure to take care of all the tactical possibilities. Yeah, you should not capture bishop takes f4. I should mention this. If we go back, if let's say I play rook e1, knight f4, you should not capture this. This would be a bad move because after capturing, the bishop will open, the knight will come to e5, and you can never capture this pawn because he will have queen f6, g5. And you should almost never play this. There are some circumstances this can be played. Sometimes it is okay, but in most cases this is not good. You have to analyze the elements, but because black will have total control over the dark squares, that is why you should not play this move. And if this was the case, I would recommend a move like bishop f1, just saving the two bishops and not exchanging on f4. But we anyway managed to avoid this with g3, so this is not really a problem. Yeah, knight back. Yeah, yes. Usually these moves are very bad or very good. Knight back moves are usually very good or very bad. They are one of those. Sahil, b4 is possible, but first we would like to kind of gain the bishop pair. And after knight f2, the bishop on h3 is trapped, so he has to capture. Bishop takes, king takes, and now queen d7. So black is trying to develop fully, and he is ready to kind of bring his other rook into play. Bishop d2, white also develops. Bishop f8. I told you guys, he basically wasted 2 moves with rook e8, rook f8, and this gives white 2 extra moves. So rook a c1, this makes a lot of sense, bringing his rook into play, preparing c5. Yes, we will play b4. We will just play b4 right now after developing. Yes, Rishun. Actually, black will like to play f4. Although I would not recommend white to play f4 because his king would be weak. There will be some exchanges, and then the g file will open, which is not really good for white. So I think black would probably try to play f4 or f takes e4. White should not go for f4 here because black's pieces are well set up to use this. Yes, Shreya, King's Indian is very risky and not many players play this at black. With proper preparation, with understanding, white will be mostly better. But because there are many tactical possibilities, many players prefer this. Even Pernali prefers this, and that's why many players play this. But usually, objectively, white is better. There is no doubt about it. So rook a c1, b6, and b4. Sahil, your move. Finally, we played b4, knight f6, and c5. So you see, because black has not managed to create enough counterplay, the knights were kind of trotting on each other's paths. So this does not work well for him. And this is why I think white is better. So b takes, rook a b8, and c6. You can see how dominating control white has over the queen side. And this is just very bad for black. Great, Sahil. I'm glad you have the same choices. So queen c8, rook b1, rook b6, and now bishop e3. So we want black to exchange. We want him to play this so that next we can play rook b7 and we will be completely winning. So black decides to sacrifice an exchange. He does not capture on b1. We also kind of do not hurry. So now we see how all our pieces are controlling the g4 square, and there is no way for, let's say, black to make any inroads here, and white is just better. He's controlling the king side and he's progressing on the queen side. So now black decides to get his passive knight into play, knight f7, and now we just capture the exchange, why not? And knight h3, knight g4, takes. So we are material up, we do not mind exchanging pieces. Knight f2, queen c8, queen e2, and we prevent queen a6 from black, and we also prepare queen g4 for white, trying to exchange queens or trying to attack on the king side. Okay, I will answer that question, Rishul. Rishul, the issue is that if he captures here, I will capture. And as I mentioned, on the queen side, white is playing on the queen side here, and black is playing on the king side. And usually when you're playing on one side of the board, you would like to make progress there. And by capturing here, white c file is open. I'm already threatening to capture on c7. Even if you defend it, I don't know how you will defend it, but let's say you manage to somehow with knight e8. I will just play queen c6. I want the queen exchange, because if queens are exchanged, then this f5 is not really anything. If anything, it weakens the e5 square. Next, rook b1 or rook c1, and bishop c7, bishop e3, bishop a6, bishop b7, and this is horrible for black. So black is trying to keep the structure as closed as possible on the queen side, and that way he will retain some chances. And just to keep the structure closed, that is the reason he sacrificed and exchanged. That way he keeps the structure closed, but somehow white is material up, so he should be better. So he sacrificed, but he did not have much choice, Pratik. Hi, Shreyash. Yeah, it's like Sicilian in the manner that both sides have their own sides of play. In the Sicilian, black plays on the queen side, white plays on the king side, and here it's completely opposite. White plays on the queen side, black plays on the king side. So that is the only thing. Harshal, I did not understand your question. Beat any opening. Which opening do you? I did not understand your question, I think. So now knight h3, I exchange these pieces, and now queen e2 you mentioned, h5, he prevents queen g4, but it doesn't help. Knight h3, queen a8, rook f2, just defending a2 and preparing to double. Rook e8, g4, opening up the king side, h4, g5, queen c8, rook b3, rook might be coming here, rook e7, king g1, knight h8, rook a3. So the rook is now ready to enter here as well. That was very clever. Rook f7, rook g2. And I just kind of, because I was low on time, I just tried to move around the pieces a bit. Vishal, no. If you are, let's say, worse, then you want to keep as many pieces as possible on the board, because then there are more chances of your opponent going wrong. The position is complicated. He can make a mistake. If you are worse, if you try to exchange pieces, then you're helping your opponent, because he is basically simplifying the position, and it will make it easier for him to convert his advantage. If you mean as white, yes, white should exchange pieces, and I did exactly that after rook takes n6 and knight takes knight f2. Especially if white is the side who's better, should try to exchange pieces. Yeah, knight h8 is very bad, Pratik. I understand. Shreyash, I would recommend. I think any opening is fine. You should just understand how to play it. That is the basic idea. I would not recommend the King's Indian for everybody. If you like dynamic positions, I would recommend the Nimzo Indian or the Queen's Indian. If you prefer solid positions, I would recommend the Queen's Gambit declined. So these are the games that I would recommend, the openings I would recommend you to look at. So knight g5, queen g4, h3, king g3, queen d8, knight h3. You can see how black's position is falling apart. Bishop h6, takes, queen e6, king f8, queen takes g6. One last check by black, bishop f4, king g2, and here my opponent resigned because rook h3 and rook h8 is coming, and there is no way for black to defend this. Yeah, Rishula, absolutely correct. If white is better, he should try to exchange pieces. I just refrained from exchanging rooks because for a couple of moves because I was low on time, and usually you gain some time once you reach the 40 moves. So I was just waiting for 40 moves before making a decision. I am not sure about recommending King's Gambit, Pratik. I think it's very risky, and there are many ways for black to play and gain complete equality, if not a better position. So you can play it as a surprise weapon, but I would not recommend it as a full-on repertoire, guys. So now we look at the next game, guys, which will be the last in the King's Indian, and this will kind of cover up the basic ideas. Just a moment, guys. Yeah, he played some played Kings against Carlson, yeah, but he lost very badly actually. रेसिज्म नहीं है प्रतीक, ओपनिंग्स के लिए रेसिज्म नहीं होता. I have played the Rilo Pace Triage. I used to play this as a kid. I used to play the exchange variation, but nowadays I play 1d4 mostly. I have played e4 recently, but mostly I play 1d4. Just a moment. So finally, we have the last game. Vishal, the problem is that you can play random moves, but your opponent, if he's well prepared, if he understands the opening, he will gain an advantage out of the opening itself. And these openings have been prepared after hundreds of years of research and games. So if somebody else knows what to do against your other choices, then they will gain an advantage. They will put a lot of pressure on you, and then you will be on the back foot right from the start, and that is very depressing. If you start a game of chess and it's going to last five hours, and in the first hour itself you are worse, you are defending, and it becomes very difficult to kind of play a game of chess. And you would like to have fun, you would like to attack, you would like to play aggressive chess, you like to enjoy the game, have winning chances. So that's why opening theory is important. If nobody would prepare opening theory, then it would be all okay, but other people might do that, and then that's why you do not want to be left behind. So that's why you should have theoretical preparations. Maybe it's not required till a huge depth, but you should understand the principles, at least why somebody, how you play the opening, where the pieces go. At least these things you should know, and then you can slowly build up a repertoire. It's not something you should know from the start itself, but you should understand the opening principles at least. Sure, Sahil, you can come back later. So now, guys, d4, we reach the same position as we discussed, knight c6. This is the main line, knight d2, and here my opponent played c5. This is another way to play, and after, here we play rook b1. So once black plays c5, we don't want to capture here, guys, because then after c takes d5, he's preparing d5 already. So I think black has the center here, so we should not exchange our central pawn for his b pawn. So that would be wrong. We should keep the center strong like this. Shreyash, positional evaluation is very important. There are many elements. One would be king safety. The number one element of positional evaluation is king safety. How safe are the kings? In this position, both kings are pretty safe. The next would be, let's say, something like the pawn structure. the space advantage, the advantage of the two bishops, queenside pawn majorities, and all of these elements combined, let's say amazing square for the knight and more space for your pieces. When you combine all these elements, you analyze all these elements one by one in any position, you will eventually come to the conclusion who is better. It's very difficult, of course, to understand which element is more important in a certain position, but with the help of calculation, you can come to that decision. If it's 5 plus 0, of course, without increment, the maximum time will be 10 minutes. But usually in an over-the-board game, it's usually 90 minutes each, plus 30 seconds increment in each move. So it can last as long as the players are ready to play. So it's very, very difficult to estimate a certain time. But yes, most games finish within 4 hours, I would say. So rook b1, knight e8, b4, b6. So again, black does not want to open up the queen side. He just keeps his position solid, keeping his pawn chains solid and closed. So white wants to open. B takes c5, b takes c5, and now knight b3. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the game could end earlier. Rishul is absolutely correct. The maximum time is 10 minutes. So f5. So finally black is ready with f5, guys. This is a very important move for black. He has to play this to create counterplay on the king side. So now here I played bishop g5, bishop f6, bishop d2. So why did I play this, guys? So bishop g5, because black's next move will be knight f6 to put pressure. So we play bishop g5, bishop f6 and bishop d2 to kind of prevent the knight from coming to f6. And that way white gains a move basically. And that is the idea behind bishop g5 and then bishop d2 rather than directly bishop d2. So that was the clever way to do it. And now bishop d7, f3, a6, and now bishop d3, f4. So finally black is ready. He has put his pawns. Next he will play g5, knight g6, h5, g4, and start pushing. Yes, Pratik, obviously if both sides have 5 minutes each, of course they will run out of time, because at any point at least one player's clock is going on, so the game cannot last more than the combined time of both players. If there's increment, then it can last longer. So now knight e2. So the idea here is again knight a5 and rook b7, knight c6, and such moves make a lot of sense. So guys, you can understand, because black is attacking on the king side, we are going to penetrate with all our pieces on the queen side. We want to push our pieces to the 7th rank, to these squares like let's say c6, b6, b7, c7, e6. We want to use these squares for our pieces, because this is the way we will kind of penetrate with our pieces on the queen side while black is trying to attack us on the king side. Rishul, he will have to do that. He will have to move his bishop some point, but he's waiting for the right moment. Maybe the bishop can come up with some random square. For example, I could accidentally play rook e1, then he could play bishop h4 with tempo, and that way he will not have to play bishop g7 and waste a move. So he's trying to prevent the wastage of move. That is the only thing. So now knight c8. So black realizes that these squares are very important. So I just play knight a5. I'm ready to push my knight to c6, bishop h4, king h1, knight g7, rook b7. You can see how my pieces are entering, and black is also trying. He's trying hard, but it's not so easy. And now knight c6. So he could have captured here, and this would be a dynamic position, but he decided to play on the queen side, king side that is. And this is a very interesting position, guys. So I'm going to leave you this position. So this is your next puzzle, guys. What do you think white should play here? Here white has a very interesting move, a very interesting maneuver. If you see it, you will be very surprised at the move. So what do you think white should play here, guys? Yeah, Pratik, you're right. You're absolutely right in this case. but this is the maximum time, not the, let's say, it's the maximum time. It's not really, let's say, the actual time. Pratik, that is interesting. But first of all, we want the knight on e2 in many cases because it controls the g3 square. Otherwise, black can play bishop g3 and queen h4 and try to mate us. And second, we already have a knight on c6, so the knight on a5 would not be doing much. They would be kind of treading on each other's paths. So knight on a5 would not do much. So there's another maneuver. Queen d4. I think you mean queen a4, Rishul. Queen a4. It's possible. It's possible. But I think there's a better move. There's just a better move here, Rishul. I think there's a better move. There's a better move here. Queen b3 is also possible. Not this. Queen b3 is also possible, guys, with the idea of rook b8 and trying to get to the 8th rank. This is, I think, a decent idea. But there is an even better move. Pratik and Shreyansh, you are correct. Queen b3 is a good move, I think, here. But there's a better move, guys. Yeah, Harshal. Bishop exchange with bishop e1 is possible. I think that is not so bad. That is definitely possible. That is possible. That is possible also. But there's an even better move here. Yeah, Pratik, that is possible. But the problem with these knight moves are they take a lot of time. And as you know, black is trying to attack on the king side. So you might not have so much time actually. That is the problem. So maybe time is of utmost importance here. So that's why you have to find a better move here. Knight b8 is possible. Knight b8. Let me have a look. Yeah, I kind of like knight b8, to be honest. It's not a bad move. It looks like a nice move because the bishop is attacked, and if the bishop moves, we can exchange these two rooks. That would be okay for white because this is an attacking piece. Yeah, this would be decent. Maybe the only issue is that after black moves, captures, and let's say captures, maybe we have to move the knight again. I think that is the issue. So we are wasting two moves with knight b8 and knight c6. I think that is the issue here, guys. Maybe that is the issue, but this does not feel like a bad move. Knight b8 is possible. Okay, guys, I'll tell you the move because it is a bit difficult. So the move is bishop to a5. So you can see how the queen is almost trapped here. So we try to exchange the bishops because this bishop is a strong attacking piece, but we don't give black a choice, and we also misplace black's queen. So this queen is almost trapped here, and that is the idea with bishop a5. We want to exchange bishops, but we also want to force black to do it because if you play bishop e1, he's not forced to exchange. So in this case, he is, because otherwise his queen will be trapped. So that's why bishop a5 is a very interesting move, and if he does nothing, the queen will basically be trapped, and that's why bishop a5 is an interesting move. So here he played queen g5, now bishop d8, queen h5, takes, and now I also played knight b8, guys. But I think in this position better is queen b3, and this way you can have better chances. But I also played knight b8. I also wanted to do the same thing which you guys mentioned, and now queen b3, queen e7, rook b1, rook a7, knight c3. So now that there is no kingside attack, the bishop has been exchanged, the knight has moved back. Now you can move all your pieces to the queen side, guys. So bishop c2, king e7, queen b2, king d8, bishop a4, takes, knight e8. Here knight c6 was, I don't know, I think there would have been some move order issues. I might have entered the game incorrectly. It is possible, guys. So this was the position. And Yeah, knight e7 is possible, guys, in that position after bishop a5. I think it is possible. Let's say knight e7. But the problem is, first of all, the bishop is hanging. I think that is one problem, I would say. So I think because of that, it's not really possible. And second, knight e7 is still not going anywhere, even if the bishop was not hanging. So it's not really a convincing move, I think. So that is the problem, I think, because knight e7 is not really going anywhere. That is the problem, guys. So here he tried to simply exchange the bishops, and after something like this, we landed in this position. This was just some maneuvering, guys. Both sides are trying to improve their pieces. It's not really important to the game as such. And once we reach here, now here is when I played knight to c6. So this is the pawn sacrifice. Yeah, Pratik, a lot of stuff is happening. Shreya, we can do collaborations, but somehow usually what happens is that there are two kind of chess channels. One who are very successful, like Chess Base India, whom you mentioned, and one who are like us, who have just started. So in those cases, collab is not really possible. And of course, there are collaborations possible with channels who have just started, and we might do that in the future. But in general, collaborations are not possible with people who are, let's say, very successful with, let's say, Chess Base India or such channels, because they are very successful, and they would not gain anything out of it. Usually when Vidit and Chessbase India kind of stream together, they both gain out of it, and that's why they stream together. Yeah, the poor king on d8. I agree. So now I sacrificed a piece with knight takes, pawn takes, because I gained this important d5 square, and my opponent realized that, so he played rook a8, queen b7. So we are entering into black's position. Queen takes, rook takes, and now this position is completely lost, because h7 is hanging, knight d5 and c7 is coming, and here my opponent blundered. He was rated around 2250, guys, so he was a strong player, and I was rated around 2000 then, and he had no hopes. Of course, this was completely lost. He played rook c8. So what is the winning move for white here, guys? This is the question. This is an easy one. So let's say who can find this. Queen takes c8, queen b6. Let me check that. Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Pratik. Yeah, that is also possible. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. The rook is hanging, so white would win the game. You're absolutely correct. So what is the winning move here, guys? Shreyash, okay. Shreyash, I can do that with Chess-Based India Hindi, but I don't really know Nikhilesh personally. That is the issue. So that's why I'm not really sure about that. Pawan Dodeja and Nikhilesh are actually friends, so it is much easier to collaborate with friends, let's say. But okay, Pernali has kind of streamed with Chess-Based India Hindi, so maybe it is possible. I don't know as of now. Yeah, Pratik, you're absolutely correct. And Shreyash, you're absolutely correct. Rishul, you're absolutely correct. Rook d7, my opponent just simply missed mate in one. But I think he had nothing else, because this is completely lost position. Completely lost position, guys. So this, guys, was an introduction to the King's Indian, and I hope you like this. And this way you can actually build up your opening repertoire. So now what we are going to do is, now we'll try to simply look at one more opening. I think for today we'll keep it limited to three. I maybe wanted to look at four, but I will look at one more opening, that is the Grinfeld. We'll look at one or two games just to analyze how that game goes on, because if you're playing against the King's Indian, your opponent can also play the Grinfeld, and I want you to be prepared just in case your opponent plays that. So you need to know what the Grinfeld is. So guys, do you know what is the Grinfeld defense? How does black play in it? Does anybody know? What are the opening moves there? Just a moment, guys. Yes, guys, absolutely correct. Grinfeld Defense is that is the opening. So the idea is that Black basically plays with his pieces, and this is the opening which has been played by many players. Uh, Kasparov has played it, and he really loved it. I think, and this is a full-on repertoire against d4, and there's a lot of theory, and Black is doing fine in many lines. But on the other hand, it gives White a decent and, in fact, an amazing center, and White will try to take advantage of it. So let's try to understand this. So d4, knight f6, g6, knight c3, and here bishop g7 would transpose to the king's Indian. But here our opponent plays d5 and takes e4. So you're taking the pawns in the center. You already have the center with you, and Black will try to, instead of trying to, let's say, have the center, he will try to attack your center with his pieces, with his pawns, and that's how he will try to create counterplay. Yeah, Rishul, exactly. If king c8, knight d5 would be completely lost. Next, I will capture on h7, and there's nothing doing. Sahil, I will finish till I complete this. This will be the last opening of the day. We will cover 3 openings, and next time I will go for the Queen's Gambit declined, because that can also come from d4 d5 and also from d4 knight f6. So we can cover it with d4 d5. That way, it will be a comprehensive thing. And before this, you've already looked at the Nimzo, so you will have an idea of all the Nimzo Indian defense, the King's Indian defense, the Grunfeld, as well as the Benoni. So you will know about this. So now, if rook b8, Rishul, I can just capture on h7. I think that is the thing. I mean, at the very least, I can capture on h7, and I will have a strong pawn on c6 and a strong knight on d5. So that will be winning for White. So takes, bishop g7, and this is the way Black will use his bishop and the pawn on c5, the queen on a5, and knight on c6 to kind of create a lot of pressure on this pawn on d4, and that's what we have to maintain. If we can maintain this center, White will be just better. So bishop e3, c5, rook c1. So we already prepared to bolster the center with all these pieces. We will now develop the king side. So queen a5, queen d2, c takes, and Black decides to head to the end game. So this is a normal opening for Black also, and White is also prepared. Now the bishop is hanging, so Black simply castles, and now knight f3. Ah, great. Okay, mate in 2. Yeah, maybe it's possible. Yeah, Pratik. So now rook d8 and king e1. So you get rid of out of the pin, and bishop g4, bishop e2. So now if you look at this position, it's kind of a middle game without queens. White has the center. Black has an extra pawn on the queen side. So if Black manages to break this center favorably without giving any other concessions, then he will be better in the end game with the outside passed pawn. If White manages to hold this center, then he will use these pawns to push Black's pieces back, and that way he will have a better advantage. So that is the basic idea here. Can White maintain his center? So knight c6, d5, bishop f3, and gf3. If you capture with the bishop, knight d4, rook c4, takes, and rook c8, and because White's king is still here, Black is completely fine here. So you capture with the pawn, knight d4, rook c4, knight b5, rook c5, knight c3, bishop g5. You're basically just moving around, trying to kind of, let's say, just get this rook into play. Somehow, if you manage to get this rook into play quickly, then I think White will be better. Yeah, Pratik. If it is an endgame where Black's king comes to d6, he manages to blockade these pawns, then Black will be better with the outside passed pawn on the queen side. And this is a well-known strategy for Black. So now rook dc8, and Black is trying to challenge White's rook, while White is not prepared to kind of attack Black and support his rook. So I just captured the pawn on e7, rook takes, and bishop takes. So White has won a pawn, but it's not so clear because I cannot even castle because the bishop on e2 is hanging, and black immediately plays rook c8, and after bishop e3 he captures the pawn on a2. Now this is the classic, uh, let's say, Grunfeld struggle, the central pawn against the corner pawns, and this is the struggle we are going to focus on now. So now I played king f1. I think even a better move would have been king d2. Not be scared of this check or knight c3. There is nothing doing here. Of course, king d3, knight b4 would be checkmate. This is why I was a bit scared. But king c2 is absolutely fine for white, and this is actually better for white. So now I in the game played king f1, knight c1, bishop b5, a6, bishop d7, rook d8, and now bishop h3 to control the c8 square so that black cannot enter with his rook on the c file, guys. So that is the idea, to keep the bishop here on h3. Rishul, if he had played, it was not really possible to play king c7 because I had played queen b7 and the queen was on c7. So he took on b7, I took rook takes b7, and the rook controls the 7th rank. And if you play king c8, I will just play knight d5 and I still control the c7 square. And if you play rook b8, simply knight b6 is possible, and also rook takes h7 is possible. So I think in any case, once your knight is on d5, you control the 7th rank. I think white is just completely winning. So now knight b3, king g2, bishop d4, and I wanted to keep the bishop pair, and that's why I played bishop f4, guys. So now knight c5. Vishal, what I'll do is at the end I'll go back to the game and we'll have a look at it properly. So let's complete this game very quickly and then we'll head to that bishop, that game that is. So now rook d1. So it makes a lot of sense to finally get this rook into play, and we'll use these two bishops, guys, and the passed pawns to kind of push our pawns forward and queen them. As of now, the queenside pawns are very backward. They're not really doing much, and that's why I think white is simply better here. So bishop c3, bishop c7, rook a8. You can imagine the rook on a8 is very passive. And now d6, passed pawns must be pushed, guys. So push them. And after knight e6, I simply decide to capture because f takes and d7, and this is completely lost. Bishop f6, queens, takes, and my opponent tried to kind of do some things here, but with the extra piece, he's not really going to manage anything, and I managed to blockade these pawns on light squares, and now I'm completely winning. I played f4, h6, h4, h5, and f3, and now my opponent has to get rid of this control of this pawn, and he resigned because it would be lost once I capture the e6 pawn. So you understand the kind of struggle, and I might even do a further stream later on the Grinfeld because this is a very interesting opening. But in general, I think the struggle is for the central pawns against the queenside pawns. So you just have to keep your center solid. You don't have to do something fancy. Just support your center. Play bishop e3, c3, rook c1, knight f3, bishop e2, queen d2 if queen a5, and just try to support your center. If you manage to support your center, then you will never have any problems. One more thing I must mention, that whenever, if let's say black were to, let's say somewhere here, whenever black plays, let's say f5 in the opening, there can be some instances where he can go f5, not in this position. You should not capture on f5, you should go f3. Just keep that in mind. That is another important strategic element to keep in mind. So if f5, then f3 you have to play, always supporting your center. I think you should kind of keep that in mind as a principle. If you're supporting your center, the move would probably be good, and then you can support it by calculation. So this was the Grinfeld, guys. It was a short game, but I think it at least would have helped you to understand the basic principles. So how you kind of support your center. And now we'll go back to the previous position because that was what we Vishal wanted to ask. So just a moment, guys. Yeah, yeah, after queen exchange, king is absolutely safe in the center. That is the whole principle, Sahil. You're absolutely correct. So we'll head to that position, Rishul. Just a moment. I have the game. So takes king c8, knight d5. So what do you mean here, Rishul? Because knight c7 is not possible because I can just capture. So which move do you mean here? It's not really possible because I can just capture with the rook. And of course, there are many moves here because these pawns are also hanging. You always have to take care. Great. Okay, so you understood, Rishul. That is great. Knight c7 is not possible. And if you play rook b8, I have knight b6, of course, which Pratik has mentioned, and followed by rook d7 would be made. And even if it wasn't made, I can simply capture here. Okay, I cannot capture here because there is mate actually. I missed that. But I think anyways, even knight e7 is possible here, and I can just capture the rook even if mate was not possible. And I could have, of course, here even just captured here, and it would still be winning because knight c7 is not possible because of this, and it's actually losing for black. And if black plays rook b8, then I just play h4, keeping a square for my king. And next I will play, let's say, knight c7. I can again play this, and it is again losing for black. So you can see how difficult it is for black to play this game, and that's why it is completely winning for white. Knight c7 before, but this is the first okay, you mean here. Okay, but here I think I can just go knight d5, Rishul, because I am not really afraid of this. This feels fine for white, and I think this is better for white, Rishul. If here knight c7, I do not see any problems because I can first of all simply play knight d5. I think this is just fine. There is no issue at all here because if he plays rook c8 to support the knight, then I will just play h4 or h3, and next I will play rook a7, capture here, or because whenever he captures, I will capture with this, and because of this protected pass pawn, rook d7 coming, and I can, of course, instead of h4, I can also just play, let's say, rook c8. I can play king g1 just to kind of bring the king to the center. Yeah, Pratik, it can happen. Back rank is always an irritant. It can happen. Great, Rishul. So that is fine. So usually if you have a protected pass pawn, that is great in the end game. Just to keep in mind, because if let's say knight takes, pawn takes, I will bring the king to e4 like this, and so this way I'll get the king to e4, and I can always have this in the mind. I can have this in mind. I can have this in mind. I have many options here, and white is completely winning. Yeah. Pratik, you're absolutely correct. In that position, knight b6 trap the rook. I was just trying to understand in general, like just to kind of prevent any mates. Okay, Shreyash. I just saw your message. Yeah, I can do that. A dynamic opening with black against d4 would definitely be either the Semislav or the Nimzo Indian, and I can definitely kind of come up with something. I have played both in my games, so I can maybe show you a bit of both, maybe in the next stream, and then you can pick which one you like, and I can do that in pretty soon, in a couple of days maybe. Dutch, I think, is not a good opening, Pratik. I love playing against the Dutch as white, so I would not recommend learning the Dutch because you're already giving up the e5 square in the opening itself. I do not like that opening as black. It's just horrible. Carlsen has played it, of course, but Carlsen is Carlsen. Carlsen can literally play one h6 and one a6 and still win. He can play the bomb cloud and win. He can play anything and win. But we are not Carlsen, so we should kind of try to stay limited in our capabilities, let's say. Yeah, his rook is very passive. I think the pass pawn on c6 is very strong, guys. So guys, with this I will end the stream. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I hope you learned something. If you want to, you can look back at the stream at the specific opening you want to look at. And as I mentioned, there is this online database. you can kind of also look at games, and that way you will also be able to go deeper into this. And I think you should always play these openings because you will learn a lot. Chess is unlimited. There is no bound to the game of chess, and there's so many openings that you can try. So you should try, even if you lose at first. Of course, I in my first game where I played in the King's Indian against as white, I managed to lose horribly, but I managed to come back. I won the second game, so that way you can always come back. If you lose the second game, you'll win the third and the fourth game. So you try new openings, you learn something new, and then you get better. That is the way to move forward, I think. Yeah, Carlson is Carlson, and rest of the world is rest of the world, I think, Pratik. So great, guys. With that, I will end the stream. I hope you enjoyed it. Before you leave, do like it, and if you know anybody who wants to learn these openings, do recommend the stream to them. And if you're here for the first time, do subscribe, and we'll be coming up with streams every day. For Nimzo Indian, Carlson, Shreyash, I think Carlson has played many games in the Nimzo Indian, um, who has played amazing games. It's been his go-to opening against 1d4, and I would highly recommend looking at Carlson's games with the Nimzo Indian. He has played some amazing games. I personally have looked at some before I played it myself, so you can look at Carlson's games. Great, everybody. So with that, I'll head off, and I hope you have a nice day ahead, and take care. See you soon, guys. Bye. Keep smiling.